One of the best games ever made, says one content creator. Another one chimes in calling it incredible. So, Manor Lords waltzes into early access, all high and mighty, with over 100,000 copies sold on its first day. Naturally, we had to have a butchers at this ourselves, and I can say, lads, Manor Lords ain't just another brick in the city builder wall. It's got a bit of spice, evolving the whole genre just enough to make you sit up. But hold on to your horses. Looking at what Manor Lords is today, you'd be off your rocker to call it Game of the Year this early on, as there are simply too many puzzle pieces missing. And you know what? That's A-OK, because what really gets us juiced up is what Manor Lords is going to shape up to be. So put the kettle on, grab a cuppa as we get stuck into this early access review. Manor Lords then tries to throw a curveball into the formula. It fancies itself a city builder packed with all the usual razzle-dazzle you'd expect, but then it throws in a cheeky dollop of basic RTS, letting you shuffle your villagers into formation for a bit of the old argy-bargy. It sort of works a treat, but it's also a bit of a thorn in its side, one of Manor Lords' biggest Achilles heels, but I'll chew your ear off about that later in the video. As a builder though, the game is like sticky toffee pudding, proper addictive and fulfilling. It also has some clever quality of life tweaks that leave other city builders in its dust. You start off with your own Skid Row with a bunch of villagers living out of homeless tents. Your first job is of course to get them shelter, a bit of grub and some water. You then start plonking down plots, but of course you then need the timber. So you set up a logging camp, then a sawmill for planks or a woodcutter's lodge for firewood. Before you know it, those cosy little forests are getting thin on the ground, and you'll find yourself hiring a bunch of Greta Thunberg lookalikes just to replant the trees to ensure a sustainable future. In time, your town develops a basic blueprint which lends nicely into one of the slickest road systems I've ever seen in a city builder. The roads in this game, they don't cost you a penny in materials. They're just dirt paths that you can twist and shape however you fancy. Once you drop a few structures down, the roads can click and snap around them, create an authentic looking medieval city that's proper smart. But get this, when you're building housing, the blueprints sort of morph and fill in the gaps like a snug glove. If you've ever had a go at something like City Skylines, you know the aggro of building on a curved road and ended up with gaping holes because no assets fit as it should. Drives you up the bloody wall, but not here though. It's like magic. Everything looks and feels spot on, and the system churns out some very natural looking views that will make you think that you've stepped back in time. And speaking of housing, you've got the usual upgrades you snag when you tick certain boxes, like having a local boozer or a church in your town. Meet those criteria and your housing shoots up to the next tier, unlocking some nifty features. One of the top tricks is the ability to slap a little extension on the end of each plot, if you allow the room of course. For instance, you might let one of your houses whack in a vegetable patch or a chicken coop just to scrounge up some extra grub. But as you boost your housing tiers, you start getting into the heavy gear, like building a blacksmith to knock out weapons and armour, which is crucial stuff in Manor Lords. It's a breath of fresh air then, having housing that really rolls up its sleeves and gets stuck into the core gameplay features, unlike other games where you just plonk down houses and forget about them. It's probably time we talk about one of the biggest headaches in Manor Lords in terms of its challenge, and that is the weather. It's got seasons, so food is king, and you've got to plan your farming around it. Question is, have you got enough munch to get your villagers through the nippy winters? And what about firewood when they're freezing their nuts off? Disease might pop up, and before you know it, a nasty winter can leave you up shit creek without a paddle. It ain't quite Frostpunk level brutal, but it's definitely one of the toughest nuts in the game. Many a time my villagers were peering out their windows at the fluffy snow, their stomachs howling for a hog roast, only to end up gobbling down whatever shit they could scrounge off from the floor. Good stuff it was. Here's where savvy farming can be a real lifesaver though, one of the prime ways to rake in food, especially if you're planting on fertile land tailored for different crops. And if you're clued up, you'll let a field sit idle for a season to spruce up its fertility, so crop rotation is your new best friend. It all sounds a bit like a brain teaser, but getting your crops up and running is a doddle. Before you know it, that freshly harvested wheat is being turned into Wonder Bread for your townsfolk. But here's a bit of a pickle with the system. If you've got two fields, getting them to sync up is like trying to get two left-footed dancers in step. No matter how you jiggle the crop rotation, come the new year, everything in the rotation, it bumps up a notch, and so you find yourself having to fiddle with it manually every bloody year. It'd be a right treat if these settings were set in stone, so you could just set them and forget them. So all in all, it's a solid builder with some cracking features and some top-notch moments, but it ain't all strawberries and cream. First off, we've got to remember that this is early access, and with that comes a bit of a gap in the offerings. What it's currently missing is one or two features that really turn your town on its head. Game changers that are not only tough to unlock, but a real pain in the arse to build. It probably needs a few more buildings for sure. You see, the pace of unlocking new items is rapid, which you'd think is a good thing, but here's the kicker. The actual sense of speed in the game is like watching paint dry. And before everyone gets their knickers in a twist, this isn't about wanting to blitz through the game. I love watching my little folks potter about their day at normal speed, but the progression here is so sluggishly slow, it makes a snail's race seem like the Olympics. Eventually you're going to crank this up to its fastest speed just out of sheer frustration. I hope they can tweak this so that we can progress a tad quicker, even at normal speeds. It would keep things lively without having to smash the fast forward button. Other little niggles that I've run into include a lack of feedback about what's going pear-shaped with my town. It's a guessing game if it's bugs or just me screwing up. There was this one time when my town was raided and left absolutely in ruins. I hit the rebuild button on structures, but nothing stirred, not a sausage. It drove me absolutely bonkers as villagers just stood still. And it wasn't until I moved everything to a new location did the gormless villagers kick into gear and started harvesting again. Another time construction was halted, all my villagers were set to build mode, and yet sod all happened. It turned out I was short of a spare ox to haul around some timber, but could I buy one? No chance. I was skint from another raid, and the game didn't drop a hint. I was left to stew, and I sussed it out myself in the end. But you're going to come across loads of moments like this, and sure, it's par for the course with the early access title, but don't go into it thinking this is anywhere near the finished article. So now we hit the Achilles heel of Manor Lords, the RTS bit. Now the world's map's massive, almost giving you a bit of a Supreme Commander thrill with how you can zoom out and see a whopping map of regions dotted with key resources like clay, iron or stone. Zoom in and you're smack dab in the middle of a gorgeous world. This setup quickly leads you into the thick of the action where bandits and enemy armies are up to no good in real time. By arming your citizens with spears and shields, you can rally them to a spot and off you toddle into battle. There's almost a total war feel to it where you can line up your lads and tell them to hold their ground or push forward. But here's the issue. The tactics are weaker than your nan's arms. It's mostly a numbers game and the battles are on the small side, what with you only having small towns and not massive armies at your beck and call. I like the direction that they're taking here, and this bit could really become the game's crown jewel. It just needs clearer instructions on how to arm your citizens and a better way to handle battles, maybe nicking some tactical features from other games. Otherwise there's a risk that this turns into just a nifty gimmick rather than a solid standout feature. And as for the battles, when you do take a beating and get raided by bandits, what with their overwhelming numbers, they'll tear through your towns like a bulldozer, setting everything on fire. It's a right shock to the system to see hours of graft go up in smoke, and it can throw you back to the Stone Age as you scramble to recover, rebuild and rearm your townsfolk. But by the time you just about got your head above water, you're likely to get raided again, trapping you in this grim loop of never-ending chaos and misery. A little tweak here to perhaps help your town bounce back a bit quicker wouldn't go amiss. It'd give you a fighting chance to break out the cycle and get back on your feet. Graphically, it's a looker. Running this on a 4090, it ran pretty smooth for the most part, just the odd crash and stutter here and there. Now, as you'd expect from a game set in the English countryside, or so I believe based on the voiceovers, it's a very green game, and yet it's beautifully realised with all those shades of green, forest, shrubberies, flowers, the works. But the real visual treats come with the seasons. Winter sprinkles the landscape with snow, giving everything a harsh yet glistening look. Spring showers, they bring that rain rain that heralds the start of crop season, with muddy puddles popping up everywhere. Little smoke trails, they puff from chimneys as folks go about their daily toil, with animations that show them chopping wood, carting timber and the like. Windmills, blacksmiths, bakeries, they all animate accordingly to the task at hand. As buildings go up, you can watch them take shape. First the infrastructure, then the walls, then the roof and fences. All these elements combine to make something quite special. Toss in a very solid UI and map system, and Manor Lords reveals itself as a cracking good looking game. And that brings us to the sound, and here we've got a belter of a soundtrack that really brings the medieval vibes alive. Think green sleeves with flutes and guitars, setting the stage as you go about your daily grind. But when winter rolls in or raiders storm your village, the music shifts gears, taking on a tone of impending doom that gets the old heart racing. Sound effects are also spot on, playing a key role in bringing the world to life. You've got the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the creaks of those rotating windmills, and birds chirping away in the background, all painting a vivid sense of place that's bang on the money. One of my favourite bits though is the chatter of townsfolk as they go about their day, especially when they're building housing and bantering about whether they've got the walls straight. Top marks for the sound department, no grumbles here. Manor Lords then finds itself in a cracking position. It looks, feels, plays and sounds brilliant. It's got a lot going for it, and it's worth a moment to remind ourselves that this game was crafted by just one fella. Yes, just one. And that's absolutely mind-blowing, especially when you think about the utter crap some AAA studios churn out for a whole lot more resource and cash. And the developer, fair play to him, because he starts off each and every play session with a straight up message that basically says, look lads, this game is early access, so expect it to break, and yes, a lot of it is missing. We just covered another city builder on this channel that could have done with taking a leaf out of that book. So yes, Manor Lords is worth your time and money, but I've got to wear my sensible hat too. I can't stand here and tell you that Manor Lords is perfect or the game of the year. It's missing a lot of features. The pacing's a bit off, the RTS mechanics need polishing at times, the game feels a bit like it's held together with string and tape once you go more than skin deep. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and hopefully with the money rolling in from its early access release, it can be ploughed back into the game to bring it up to scratch, because potentially Manor Lords is a future game of the year waiting in the wings. Until next time, my lovelies, Reggie out.